Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin. I am an aspiring novelist and I'm currently working on my debut dystopian post-apocalyptic romance trilogy, which will be out. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to self-publish. That'll be an update for another time. But I'm coming to you from my new workspace. This is my new house. We moved into this really cool, funky, like handmade house in Colorado. We left Salt Lake to just be able to be closer to nature, get out of the city. But yeah, we're really loving it and I love having this big workspace. I do miss my little closet office in a sense though. I do love that. I felt like that was a really fun way to write my first book. So, now I'm working on book 2, and so I've been doing it from here, which has been cool. But I wanted to touch in today. I've been really busy. I've been working on some other videos, but I've been really busy with real work and then also other things. And I wanted today to be able to just try to do something that I could get out quickly, which would be the 1,000 subscriber Q&A. I wanted to thank everybody who asked me a question. I felt really embarrassed and kind of nervous to ask because 1,000 subscribers isn't that much, but to me it's a pretty big milestone because this YouTube channel is like a really big step out of my comfort zone. Like I haven't in a long time wanted to be like a front facing kind of like content creator. It just makes me anxious. I was really grateful to get a few really interesting, thoughtful questions to be able to answer in this Q&A. I don't have a ton of space on my camera, so without further ado, I'm just going to dive into it. My first question is from Valentina, and she also has a YouTube channel. It's Comfy Era Writes, so I would highly recommend you check out her channel. And she asked, so she has a few questions, and so we're just going to kind of go through them. So the first question, what made you want to be a writer in the first place? That is an interesting question because I have never not wanted to be a writer as far as I can remember. And recently I actually found a journal from when I was in 7th grade, I think. And it was so interesting reading my like journal entries, and it was for like a class. So it was like I was getting prompted to do these journal entries. It was like my 7th grade English class. And I was so confident that I was going to be an author. Like it was so clear that that's exactly what I thought I was going to be. And so it's funny that I'm now, only now reaching the point where I'm actually becoming an author and working toward that. But, I really don't know if there was any one moment where I wanted to become an author. I think it literally was just always something that I was doing. Like I was always writing ever since I was a kid, like writing little tiny stories. I have all of these, in my like sort of childhood keepsakes bins, I have all of these books that I wrote. And, I was writing since basically the moment I could write. Like I don't actually remember a time before when I wasn't doing that. And so I don't know if it's like fair to say that I just was like birthed into this world and like always knew that this is what I was going to do. But it definitely has turned out that way. And there was definitely periods in my life where I thought that's a pipe dream. You're not talented enough. You'll never be good enough to be able to be a real writer. And so I definitely had long periods of that were like I wasn't writing and I wasn't believing that I could do this. I think maybe what I could answer now is what made me want to be a writer and what made me remember that I wanted to be a writer was this is going to sound kind of funny maybe, but I started to get really annoyed with certain stories that I was seeing. The timeline of all of this is a little bit confusing and I don't know exactly like what happened sequentially, but for a long time, I didn't think that I was creative enough to be a fiction writer. And so I just kind of resigned myself to being a nonfiction writer. And the problem with that is actually, I don't think I'm that good at nonfiction. I think my ideas are like better suited for fiction in a lot of ways. I mean, it's hard for me to judge myself, but for a long time I was like, I'm just going to be a nonfiction writer. Like fiction isn't as important. I spent a long time devaluing fiction actually, especially when Jake and I first met and we started Death in the Garden. Like I didn't read a fiction book probably for like 4 years, which sounds really crazy, but it's true. Like I was just consuming like real life nonfiction information. And I found a lot of value in that. But then I reached this certain point where I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't actually have the impact on the culture that fictional storytelling does. And the reason why I noticed that is because I started to see a lot of discourse around how movies are getting worse. And I thought that was really interesting. And it's something that I had noticed too. I had been a bit more critical as well and realizing like, man, things just like aren't like hitting the same. Storytelling just like isn't as good. And I think I read, this is maybe going to make people mad, but I read like the first 80 pages of ACOTAR. And I just didn't like it at all. I just was really having a hard time with that book. And, I was having this realization with certain storytelling, it's like Rings of Power came out and I was like, what is this garbage? Like, this is the worst show I've ever seen. And then I had this bad experience with ACOTAR, and I started to really think and realize, like, if I'm going to complain about this, like, I should sort of like put up or shut up. I was getting this feeling that a lot of storytelling that I had encountered, which again, like, I hadn't been reading a whole lot. And so I'd been mostly encountering things through like television and film. And I was just starting to feel like, it's like, man, there's like this like lack of substance or this lack of visioning of what the future could look like. Why doesn't someone write a story that gives that like provides a better vision for what the future could look like? And then I was like, well, then maybe I should do that. If I'm going to complain about it, I feel like I should probably just be the one to do it. And so then when I sort of set that intention out into the universe that like somebody should write a story like this, and then once the idea plopped in my mind for Fall of Men, I was just kind of like, okay, like, go forth. And I will, and I went forth and I just, started writing. So that was kind of what got me back into writing, was actually being kind of like frustrated with writing, but then also mostly frustrated with myself for complaining, but like not doing anything about it. And then the next question is, what themes are you exploring in Fall of Men, and what made you want to write about those themes? Great question too. Oh my God, I am exploring probably too many themes in Fall of Men, to be honest. To try to like have 1 ounce of brevity, when I read Tolkien's letters, he talked about how the Lord of the Rings, like the themes that he was exploring were death, mortality, and the machine. And I was like, man, those are like the things that I think about all the time. That's like what I've oriented my life around, especially with Death in the Garden. Like, so much of that project is exploring like humanity's relationship to life and death and technology and culture and all of these things. And so that was like very obvious. Like, I knew I was going to want to explore that. But what was interesting is that as I started writing, other themes began to sort of emerge organically. And one of the things that has come up is like the perversion of life. Like, what happens when a culture is in denial of death, in denial of mortality, in denial of limits? From my perspective, what ends up happening is a perversion of life. And so Fall of Men in a lot of ways is exploring that. But then I also have all of these other sort of elements that have come through, which is like really just like questions about costs in all of these different ways. Like, what is the cost of too much ignorance? What is the cost of too much knowledge? What is the cost of rebellion? What is the cost of complacency? Like, there's all of these other sorts of things that I'm exploring. And a lot of these things weren't 100% intentional or even like fully cognitive. They were just, when the story came to me, it was just like, oh, I guess I'm kind of like circumambulating this idea or this question. And I don't really offer a particular answer for a lot of these themes that have sort of emerged. There are certain themes that, like, yeah, I obviously have a perspective and I'm sharing it through the story. But others are kind of more like questions for myself, like, how do we hold on to our humanity when everything we love and know is threatened? And what does it mean to hold on to our humanity? What does it mean to rebel? And what is the line that we draw of what is like what is a sacrifice and what isn't a sacrifice? What are we willing to do to ensure that our mission goes forward? What point do we become villains if we go too far? So that's the fun thing about doing like an epic story like I'm doing, is I have a lot of different characters that I can kind of explore these questions through. And then she says, what other hobbies/creative endeavors do you enjoy outside of writing? That is a good question. I really love nature. I love traveling. I love the work that we do with Death in the Garden. I love researching and reading. And, I also play video games. I also, so that's stuff that I enjoy doing too. Yeah, I mean, as far as like my life goes, I spend a lot of time just like working on creative projects. Like, I think that is really my life. I'm wanting to have more just like hobby time. Like, I live right next to the mountains now. And so I want to like spend more time in the mountains and spend time hiking. You know, one of the hobbies that I had before was aerial silks, and unfortunately I don't have access to that here, so that's something that like maybe one day I'll be able to have access to again and I'll be able to do again, but for now I have to kind of put that on pause. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And she says, I'm also really fascinated to hear about how people balance finances and being an artist because it's a hard thing to do. Do you have a job? And if so, how do you balance that with YouTube and writing? How are your finances? Have you had to make any sacrifices or intentional life choices to be able to afford to be an artist? Yes. The answer to that is yes. So let me go through all of them. So yes, do I have a job? Yes. I do have an unconventional job though. I do freelance video work. Me and my partner, we have our project Death in the Garden together, but then we also do make films for like organizations. So like right now we're making films for an organization called Local Futures. And so it's like project based, it's quite freelance. And so, it's a bit feast or famine. It's kind of unconventional. But it's something that affords us a really interesting life, which I enjoy. And so, as far as balancing that with writing, it's not like I'm working like 9 to 5 every day. It's like I'm kind of on my own schedule when we're here, but then like when we're on like a film shoot, like that's like we're working all the time. Like, I'm not able to focus on writing like at all. But when I'm home and I'm able to kind of set my own schedule, it's pretty much like I wake up in the morning as early as I can and I write until like 9. So usually it's like 6 to 9. And then I do my work day for the rest of the day. And since I'm, in a way I'm making my own schedule, it's like I do have time every so often to be able to film a YouTube video, able to work on our Death in the Garden project, but then also able to work on these client projects. But then there are times when like it's all hands on deck and like all I'm doing is, I may be able to write, but then I'm not able to work on other projects and I'm only able to work on the work. Or, when we were traveling in Australia at the beginning of the year, like I didn't do any writing for 2 months while we were there because it was just so busy with the work. So it's a bit of an unconventional schedule, but luckily for me, I'm able to set it up in a way where, I can set deadlines for myself. So it's like if I know I'm going to travel for work, I will have a really strict deadline for something and then know that while I'm gone, I'm taking an intentional break. So like, for instance, I'm going to be traveling in September. And so by August, like I want to have hit a milestone, and probably that milestone will be like, I will have like the second draft of book 2 completed by then is kind of like, would be one of the ideas that I could have, for instance. But yeah, so yes, I do work, but I will say it hasn't been easy to try to be an artist and balance finances. Like for the beginning of this channel, as you saw, like we were living with my partner's parents. That has been a choice that we've had to make to be able to like focus on our dreams and focus on being able to create things. I also just like, don't do a whole lot of traveling just for fun. I don't do a whole lot of, I'm not like the kind of person who's able to go out and just like buy whatever I want for myself. We have had to budget pretty severely and we've had to like limit our lives in certain ways, but thankfully like the work that we do gives us so much abundance and like access to opportunity and experiences that I haven't felt like I've been lacking. But there have been periods of time where the financial situation has been really, really hard. And it's been this sort of push and pull between like, it's liberated me to be able to, being broke in a way, liberated me to be able to focus on writing. Had I had a bit more of a stable income for a while, I don't know if I would have taken the like leap to be like, I should write my book. I should just write my book. Something needs to give, something needs to change. And so, right now we're in a good situation, but that can always change. And so, we're always trying to just build up our Death in the Garden channel, trying to build up that, our dream with that is to be able to, for one, create these really high quality explainer videos, which I will link down below, the one that we recently did, and that will be in the comments, but it's about the Luddites, and I'm super proud of this video. Jake has done an incredible job, and we're really, really proud of how that came out, and so I'd love for you guys to check it out. But we want to do videos like that, but then we also want to ideally be like documenting like really cool projects that are happening all over the world that are like showing the changes that are happening, like the positive ecological changes, like all of these like sustainable communities and things like that. Like that's what we want to share. And we want to be able to go back and continue to share these things, continue to amplify certain voices, and then be able to, hopefully give back to them as well so that they can continue their projects. But so, our whole goal is to like educate. And so, that's something that it's like we want to put a lot of effort into and to expand. And then also, working with organizations that we're in alignment with is really fulfilling, and we're able to make really cool films that we wouldn't have been able to make otherwise. And so that's what we're doing right now with Local Futures. I hope that answers the question about job and finances. Okay, and then we have a few more questions. Okay, so Arthur asks, do you feel a bit drained / empty after writing a book, as if you've given this work everything you had and now you need to become someone else? That's an interesting question, because with Fall of Men, it was like immediately I was just wanting to write book 2. And so I wonder, I wonder if I was writing a standalone, how I would feel, if it would feel different. But I felt really excited and stoked after writing the first book, because I was like, oh my God, okay, like I opened up the floodgates and now I get to just like continue to see where this story goes. But I will be interested to see how I feel at the end of the trilogy. But actually, I am planning on writing a prequel. So like for like the foreseeable future, I'm going to be in this story world. So I don't know. I'll be interested to see. I would imagine that I'm going to have like a lot of grief about being done with this world once I'm done. But if I'm lucky, well, never mind. I shouldn't say it. But maybe I'll be lucky and I'll be like working on like the film set of the story or something, and I won't ever have to leave it. But I do feel like I've given this story a lot, but it just feels like so incomplete still. So I'll be interested to see how I feel when I'm really at the end of it. And then he asks, how long do you think you need to rest afterwards to avoid burnout, but without getting too lazy? And what do you think needs to happen during this period for you to feel ready to start work? So again, to avoid burnout, it's interesting because I do feel like there's just something about my writing practice that I haven't really experienced much burnout. I've experienced periods of like confusion and being like, okay, I'm lost in the story. I need to take a break. The other thing is, it's like I finished book 1 literally the day before we left for Australia. And then I didn't have the ability to work on anything for 2 months. I was just with beta readers that entire time. And so I don't even feel like I really had the chance to experience burnout after finishing it, because I just was like forced to not write. And that was actually harder for me. For me, the taking the break was the hard thing. Like that was really difficult for me, especially since I broke my ankle in Australia, and I was just like, all I want to do is like be in the ocean, and I can't. So I wish I could at least be in my story. But anyway, I don't know. I think that I feel like I'm still so inexperienced, and I'm actually in maybe a period of somewhat of burnout. Maybe burnout's not really the right word. I've just been really busy this month, and so I haven't like hit the writing goals that I've wanted to. When I'm interacting with the draft right now of book 2, I am feeling a little bit of like, ooh, like just like resistance, because I think maybe I'm like uncertain of where, not even really where things are going, but like how to execute when I'm trying to write. And so I guess what I would say is that I think it's good to take breaks, but I think we have to be really careful about what the break is for. Like if the break is to avoid burnout, I actually sometimes don't necessarily think that taking a break, it does, at least for me, taking a break from things that I know I need to be doing, like makes me feel even more stressed out and anxious. And so I feel like burnout for me, it like manifests in a weird way where like, yeah, I can definitely get burned out if I'm like working on something 24/7. Like that will definitely cause me to have quite a bit of fatigue. But as far as like my story goes, like I enjoy it so much that I just really love to touch in with it every day. I feel more burned out when I don't have the chance to engage with it. And so, but I think probably, it's like if you finish a book and then you have a story idea and you feel ready to write, like I think you should just go for it. Because again, I think that it's like we sometimes can really make writing into a job, when I think if we can think of it as like this is a thing that we get to do, like in a devotional to our creativity, that makes it so much more fun, because it's almost like self-care. At least is how I feel about it. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Elon Deliste asks, how do you know a story is worth saving? That's an interesting question. That's actually a good question, because I have many dead stories behind me that I've left in, various states of decay. That's an interesting one. that I want to think about that one for just like a second, because what's interesting about Fall of Men, at least, and again, it's like I can only speak from really my experience here. So I have been wanting to write something like Fall of Men, like ever since I was a teenager, like ever since I read 1984 for the first time. And it wasn't that I thought like, oh, I'm going to be like George Orwell. I'm going to write this like super amazing, like, you know, Brave New World 1984 we-esque sort of story. Like I wasn't, I was inspired by those sorts of like dystopias, but I always kind of knew like I wasn't really necessarily going to be capable of writing that, or like that probably wouldn't be my style necessarily. But I wanted to write something that was also post-apocalyptic, because around that time I was just like super into Fallout, and I've just been curious about those two genres throughout my life. But so it's like I've wanted to write something like this for a long time. And when I was in college, I started a book because I was taking a creative writing class, and I started a book called Beyond the Wall. And it was about like this woman who lives in this like dystopian society. And then it turns out that she has like X-Men powers, and she gets like cast out of the community because people aren't like, you know, because she was basically like radioactively like mutated. And it was like, you know, so they're living this like post-apocalyptic world, but then it's like a dystopian society that she lives in that's like all controlled, and they kill all of the mutants, and it was very much like X-Men inspired. But then, you know, so she's cast out into this world, and I started writing that story, and I didn't have any idea what plotting was. I had no idea that was even a thing at the time. And I wrote myself into a fucking brick wall and just gave up on the story. And that was like, that was hard because, but it was really genuinely like, I didn't know how to continue writing it. And, you know, now upon reflection, I'm like, that does feel like a little bit of a, juvenile is not the right word, but like more like young adult story. And I don't think I don't really want to write young adult. Like my target audience is adults. And so that one, it was just kind of easy for me to sort of leave it behind, actually. I didn't feel a lot of grief about the story, but I felt grief about the realization that I was like, oh, I'm just like not as good at writing as I thought I was. Not really understanding at the time that it's like, you can really learn how to be a better writer, like so much. You know, it's like, it's not this thing that you have like inborn talent and that's like the thing that carries you. It's actually like discipline and persistence that is what carries you. So there was that story. But then in 2021, after my grandma died, I was in like a really, really rough spot. And I started writing a book that's also sort of a precursor to Fall of Men. But this book was actually set at the time of the fall. And with that story, it was like this weird convoluted idea where like this woman is like super, like, you know, it's like a dystopian modernity, basically, like just take our life, but then take it to the extreme, you know, like all of the dystopian things that are happening, but just imagine them just like a little bit worse. And then society collapses was kind of like the idea. But my main character, she's just like drugged up all the time and like doesn't even really notice what's happening, and then somehow she's awakened. But it was like this extremely convoluted way, and how she's awakened is through the journaling of this, like, you know, this guy who's just like so awake and enlightened. And it was like so self-righteous, like, because it was so obvious that the guy who's like awake and enlightened was like an avatar for me and like all of my profound ideas about how society should be. And it was just like really, really on the nose. And also it was like, again, it was just like a story that didn't make any sense at all. But actually the reason I stopped writing that one is I just really didn't want to write about the fall. Like I didn't want to write about like being in the midst of it. It just felt like it was something that I would be sort of sensationalizing or romanticizing or glamorizing, like a period of history that we might be going through. And, you know, I had read like Parable of the Sower, and it's like, I understand the utility of including that and like depicting what the fall could look like. But I just really started to feel like I wanted to imagine what life after the fall would look like, and imagining it in a good way, you know, writing a post-apocalyptic story where it's like, actually things aren't bad. The bad thing is that the civilization is coming to like colonize the world again. And so that was like, once I had that sort of idea, I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense. And so, so that was like where I realized like that story wasn't worth saving. Is it was like, it just wasn't actually from the period of time or the perspective that I wanted to have that story written in. And then the next one is, how do you deal with stress? And maybe are there some tips and tricks on how to incorporate writing into your routine but avoid burnout? So that kind of again goes into what Arthur asked. And I think that, again, I really just think that it's like reframing writing a little bit as it's not a job, but it's like a thing that we get to do to like expand our imagination and engage with our creativity as this like gift that it is. And that's, I think, is what helps me not feel burned out. And then I think, so it's like recently when I've been feeling kind of like, oh, I didn't meet my goal and stuff, I've been putting too much pressure on like things like word count rather than just like the joy of touching in with my story. So, I need to practice this too. I need to practice reframing things as well. So yeah, I think I would just try to remind you, like try to, have yourself remember that like this is like a really cool thing that we get to do. And, I think incorporate it into your routine where it makes the most sense. I really love writing first thing in the morning. So that is like what works for me. But I think for other people, it'll be like right before bed or like in the middle of the day. And I think you just have to figure out what works for you. But I do think that we have to like make sacrifices to be able to fit it in. I don't think that it's just something that naturally happens. Like, I had to start going to sleep earlier and waking up earlier so that I would have time to write. That was just a choice that I had to make. And so that means sometimes that, it's like if I have my friends want to like stay out until 1 a.m, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm going home and going to sleep because I write in the morning. So, I think that, if we can reframe our level of devotion to it as like, this is a cool gift that we get, I think that that can help. But avoiding stress, like I am like a very stressed out person. So I'm still trying to figure out how to not be a stressed out person. So if anyone has advice in the comments, that would be great for me. Cause I'm a very like constantly stressed out person, but I'm trying to get better at it. But I'm hesitant to give advice about stress because I have yet to sort of resolve my own anxiety and stress problems. But I do think that like having a creative path and purpose helps make it feel worth it. Like, and any of the anxieties and stresses to feel like it's for a very valid purpose. Have you ever experienced creative burnout and how did you deal with it? So yes, 100%. I have experienced creative burnout. With Death in the Garden, we had a lot of creative burnout when we were trying to make it into one film. And it just felt like impossible because it kind of was impossible. And so the way that we dealt with it though, is that a lot of things fell apart and things got really hard for us and things got complicated. But what we ended up doing was, we didn't give up. What we did instead was we reframed like and pivoted basically like, and that's when we decided to do like a YouTube channel and start doing like short films and like view it as like, we're going to make films that are like the big end of the wedge where it's like these big philosophical ideas or like historical analyses or like video essays and stuff like that. And then also just like short films where we're sharing certain perspectives and things like that. And so we're still trying to figure it out, but the pivot has been really helpful because it's allowed us to have these like smaller, like more bite-sized goals. Not that it's been easy. It's been very hard. We've been trying to fit it in and make it happen. And being consistent with it is hard when you don't really experience like much return on it, but you're putting in all of this work. So, we definitely are grappling with burnout with that. And I think that probably like I would experience more burnout with writing if I was like putting it out into the world. But since I'm not doing that yet, it's still like mine. And so I don't feel like the sort of pressure or like the need for it to perform, or like I'm not getting like a ton of feedback from people. I'm just getting feedback from beta readers. And so I think the moment it starts becoming like a thing that people can buy, I think I'll probably have more burnout because it'll be more, the value of it will probably shift more into like, okay, this is a thing that people are consuming now. So it's going to have a different sort of valence to it. But yeah, I think that like just finding ways to pivot, or like thinking about things from a different angle has helped me, or just also just sort of making concessions of like, what are my limits? What actually am I capable of doing? What do I have the resources to do? And then making decisions based off of that, rather than sort of like lamenting about what I wish things could be like. Trying to just accept, what can I do now with what I have and only what I have. And that's been very helpful, especially in the times where we're feeling really uncertain about our path as artists, as just being like, okay, but like the only thing I can do is just keep moving forward and make adjustments where it makes sense. But yeah, it's not easy to be to be a creative in this world right now. I will say that. I think it's easy. It is easy, and it's really, really extra easy in certain ways, but it's also really hard in other ways. You know, it's like we're having to compete against so much attention grabbing, like slopified and shitified content all the time. And so it can be really hard to like find a niche that is interested in what you have to say and be able to also afford to consistently do that work. And how do you make sure not to misrepresent sensitive topics in your writing? With that, I feel like at this point, I'm just trying to make things feel as honest as possible and as earnest as possible. I'm trying not to sensationalize anything that I'm depicting in my story. And so I don't know if I've succeeded with that. That is something that I think readers will get to decide, but I'm trying to do it with a level of compassion and honesty and integrity. And I feel like that's like the best that any of us can do, is to not sensationalize or like just do it for shock value. And so here's another one from Arthur. What is the essence of art in human culture, especially compared to other forms like science or philosophy? Why has this activity taken on its own distinct form we call art and continue to exist? What is its purpose in this regard, and what does it actually do? And what advice would you give to artists on the one hand and to its consumers on the other, so that contact can take place and that this essence can be realized in both of them? What an interesting question. Yeah, I think that art and creativity and storytelling are like fundamental aspects of being a human being. I think that is something that we actually just can't avoid. It's something about us as a creature. And so I think that they're fundamental functions of culture. And I think right now we live in a culture that devalues it quite a lot. I think it's one of those things that is always bothering me, is it's like, you know, to want to be an artist is to be kind of like prissy and privileged, and maybe like you're naive and you have your head in the clouds and you should do something real with your life, when in reality it's like anybody who's saying that like doesn't go 2 minutes without interacting with art in some capacity, whether it's movies or music or television or books or just like artwork around your house. Like, this is just something that humans do. And so I think that it's something that needs to be more valued. And I think it's been this sort of dual process of like, as storytelling and art have become more commodified, the consumer then views it as product and a thing to consume, you know. And so when people view themselves as consumers, they don't see them as part of the sort of interaction of interfacing with the art. And so I think it's a big cultural problem that we have, actually. I think that we've devalued so much through the commodification that has come through, you know, the way that our industrial society functions, because our industrial society capital is commodifying absolutely everything that exists. It's commodifying all life on earth. And so of course it's also doing that to art. And so I feel like one of the things that people should do is like come back into contact with what makes them creators, for one, but also to understand that there is like more to art than like entertainment. I think that, you know, the idea that like stories should just be entertaining is, you know, I agree to a certain extent. They should have an entertainment quality to them, but I think that there's something we're lacking when we think that that's just what it is, and that it's not that deep, that stories are just for fun, and that, you know, we're just interacting with things. I think there's a sort of a nihilistic like lack of seriousness when it comes to our interfacing with these things sometimes. And so I don't know the solution other than, you know, that I was like, I guess I need to write my own story. I guess if I'm feeling this discomfort with like the way that the culture is moving, I need to like say my piece and like contribute to the culture in some capacity through my own work, whether it be through Death in the Garden or through Fall of Men. But I think that it's like it's a very complicated relationship, and it's one that like I really think that we should take seriously. It's also why I really like K.M. Weiland and her writing advice, because I just like the way that she talks about storytelling, as it's like that it's like the most powerful force on earth. And it's like, I completely agree. And I think that it needs to be valued so much more. And I just want to do what I can to be an artist in the world who is creating from this place of like, this is a big responsibility. My stories will be part of shaping culture. My creations of any kind will be part of shaping culture. And that's a big deal. Yeah, I think that it's like the consumers need to take it more seriously, and so do the artists. And the commodification of all of this has caused only problems. And even still, artists like aren't making any money, even with how much things have been commodified. And so it's a really like bleak landscape that we're in, but I'm interested to see how things change over the next few years.